The birds are returning. I was going to do a whole sermon about birds flocking together, but it didn't achieve liftoff. And it occurred to me that here in Western New York, when we see the flocks of birds returning, we just want to get straight to the point. Summer is coming. I can say that with cautious confidence because my wife Elizabeth isn't here. Elizabeth is a person for whom winter is always coming. A person for whom the glass is always half full of hot tea for a cold day. In July, she says winter is coming. In September, she says winter is coming. Instead of a wall calendar, we have a winter is coming poster that hangs in our kitchen all year round. Even in February, she says winter is coming, and I think winter is here already. And then I realize she's talking about next winter. Then we always get this warm week in early March, and I say spring is coming, and she sniffs the air, listens to the sounds of the birds and the breeze through the trees, and says, no, wait till May. Then we get blizzards and icy blasts and gales through March and April, and spring arrives precisely when she prophesied it would. In 20 years of marriage, this little conversation has become one of the cycles of nature. Sunrise, sunset, year in, year out, I get these little reminders that Elizabeth is always right. And I'm not bothered by it because when Elizabeth is right, it indirectly means I'm right too because I married the right person. But now in this first week of June, I nervously predict that summer is coming. And with the inevitable cycles of nature as summer approaches, it's time to contemplate the mysteries of Stonehenge. Do we have the clicker here? Oh, yes, please. Yes. Now, Stonehenge, if you ever look up the word summer, if you do a Google image search for summer, it shows you Stonehenge. That's what comes up. Stonehenge was sacred and mystifying even before the big mysterious rocks got mysteriously dragged there. During some archaic ice age, a solemn procession of glaciers passed through England's Salisbury Valley, dredging a groove that aligned with the midsummer sunrise. Then, 10,000 years ago, people dug pits along this axis to erect 3 massive wooden pillars, perhaps big totem poles aligned with a giant tree. Ironically, this earliest phase of sacred architecture was discovered while enlarging the tourist parking lot in the 1960s. They paved paradise and put up a parking lot, Joni Mitchell sang. But in this case, actually putting up a parking lot revealed this buried secret about paradise. Maybe someday, while building a Starbucks for Stonehenge sightseers, excavators will finally unearth some ancient rune stone or whatnot, explaining what the heck it all meant. But I sort of hope they don't, because I feel like that would ruin all the fun of pseudoscientific speculation. So that would have been a big hit at the archaeology convention. Anyway, the original construction at the site was wooden, and shepherds held parties there for centuries. We know it because of their trash. They were ancient litter bugs, throwing parties, smashing their beer pots and mead mugs, and tossing bones of animals that they had eaten at giant midsummer barbecue parties. You can learn a lot about people by digging through their trash. I was once told that Stonehenge was a solar clock, so that stiff Brits could always be perfectly punctual with their planting and harvesting. But if you plant in June and harvest in December, you would be too feeble from starvation to drag big rocks around. I guess if you planted in December, you would get to be pretty muscular from plowing through a frost. But I don't think anything would sprout in June. Anyway, it was built before farming caught on in Britain, and if the early British farmers needed to know when to plant, they would not need a giant stone sundial. They would just ask someone like Elizabeth, who would sniff the air, listen to the birds, and say, "Winter is coming." Stonehenge is the most famous of about 20 stone circles scattered throughout England, Ireland, and Scotland, erected between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago. Now, they were not village churches. Archaeologists don't find evidence of communities actually living around these monuments. Actually, they tend to be situated between the territories of nomadic shepherding tribes, which suggests that they were pilgrimage sites for seasonal, intertribal gatherings. Even when we look closer at the rocks themselves, we find that these stone circles were composed of individual stones carried from different regions, sometimes carried up to 6 miles to be gathered together in a circle. A Stonehenge is something like a stone soup in that old story about individuals contributing to a communal pot. Shepherding tribes would generally avoid each other, but apparently they would build these things for their biannual intertribal gatherings, like an interfaith worship service, with each different religion contributing a sacred stone so that they would all feel represented there. Some of these stones weigh 25 tons, the equivalent of 8 pickup trucks. And it was a circle. There was no cornerstone. Nobody's tribe got to be represented by one special stone. This is what you needed the solar clock for. Because in interfaith gathering, you want it clearly agreed when everyone needs to show up. And during the Henge period, the archaeological record shows a decline in warfare, a remarkable lack of fortifications, and very little evidence of social inequality. No high-status dwellings or lavish royal burials. It really sticks out from other architectural marvels of that era, like the Egyptian pyramids, symbols of top-down hierarchy. Stonehenge is a horizontal circle, a sign of equality. And not just human equality, the orientation is inward and outward, situating celebrants in relation to the forest, the animals, the hills, the natural world around them. Instead of a triangle pointing to some superior supernatural otherworld above. I don't want to go too far out on a stone limb here. But in the Britain of this era, we don't find the warrior tombs, the burial waste of toxic masculinity. The concentric rings of ditches, mounds, and stones suggest a feminine unity of nature. Not that the stones themselves represented goddesses, but that they were like jewelry on a giant earth mother, like a belly button ring. The henge also has a masculine consort, this guy over here, the 16-foot heel stone, who stands alone by himself, 250 feet outside of the feminine circle. But twice a year, he can pay a visit, reaching his shadow to touch the center of the circle on the sunset of the winter solstice and the sunrise of the summer solstice. Stonehenge is a solar clock, marking time as a repeating cycle of seasons. In nature, we can easily see that all of time is in circles. The stone circle is symbolic of reproduction, a biological clock with annual cycles of nature's renewal, fertility, sterility, renewal, and so on. It is a womb, and thus the mysterious Stonehenge casts the world around it as a large-scale replica of a fertile goddess. What kinds of rituals were originally practiced at the circles, we just don't know. If shepherding tribes were gathering twice a year to celebrate fertility, it's possible that things got frisky. For these tribes, it was a yearly chance for sheepish teenagers to meet other teens that they were not closely related to, like going to church camp or a concert camping festival. And we don't necessarily need to imagine this monument in its day looking like a circle of tombstones. It was likely that people would gather and that they would bring their woolen banners and flags, that there could be a colorful circle ritual. And for that matter, there's no need to imagine that it was all solemn chanting. The stones were arranged to amplify and distort sound so that shepherds could play their lambskin drums and blow their bone whistles and have it amplified in this circle. The archaeologist Ronald Hutton wrote, "For centuries, Stonehenge has functioned as a mirror in which modern people can reflect and justify their own prejudices, ideals, and expectations. Those who find their own time and society lacking have seen in it the work of ancestors of a superior knowledge and morality. Those who preach the creed of progress or their own religion have filled it in their imagination with gory, barbaric, and wild ancient rites." Throughout history, the mysterious stone circle has been a screen for various cultures to project their hopes and fears onto. But deep down, they all know, and we know it too. Stonehenge was built by ancient Unitarian Universalists. Obviously, like it was this cooperative interfaith project so that tribes could bring their flocks and teens and gods together and twice a year remember that they have something in common. Human beings are naturally tribal, suspicious of people who are different, with a special animosity toward others who are most like themselves, but just different enough to be infuriating. We are naturally tribal, but when summer comes, even the most disagreeable of neighbors have to admit that we are all human beings, and it feels good to sing together. We flourish together. This summer, tourists from all over the world will flock to Stonehenge, coming from all directions, even more than usual, since the United States has declared a Cold War on tourism. And when the tourists gather for the English solstice ritual, I hope that they can put away their phones for a minute, take a break from taking pictures, set aside the architectural mystery, and appreciate a moment of togetherness. It's one thing that we can all agree on. I won't make it to Stonehenge, but in the Snodgrass house, June 21st is the one day of the year when Elizabeth and I can agree that summer is coming. Thank you.